Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. The rent increase notice arrived on a Monday morning in 2022, right when my son Nathan was starting his junior year at that private school in La Jolla. 28 years old and already drowning in bills, I stared at that piece of paper knowing I had exactly two options: pull Nathan out of the only stable thing in his life after the divorce, or find another source of income fast. My day job at the dental office barely covered our basic expenses, and my ex-husband had vanished to Arizona with his new girlfriend, leaving me with nothing but broken promises and a mountain of debt. After weeks of researching work-from-home opportunities and coming up empty, a friend from my yoga class mentioned how she'd been making extra money through online content creation. She was vague about the details, but the numbers she mentioned made my jaw drop. The decision wasn't easy, but Nathan's education meant everything to me. I spent 3 days setting up a separate laptop, creating accounts with fake names, and learning about VPNs and privacy settings. My content was mild compared to what others were doing, just photos and videos in lingerie or workout clothes, nothing that showed my face clearly. I scheduled everything for late nights when Nathan was asleep, always locking my bedroom door and using noise-canceling headphones to stay alert for any sounds from his room. Within 2 months, I was making enough to cover his tuition and even start a small college fund. The guilt ate at me sometimes, especially during parent-teacher conferences, but I told myself it was temporary, just until I could find something better. Everything was going smoothly until I noticed changes in how my downstairs neighbor, Carl, started acting around me. Carl had lived in the building for about 5 years, a quiet guy in his 40s who worked from home doing something with computers. We'd exchange polite nods in the hallway, maybe chat about the weather while checking mail, nothing more. But suddenly, he was everywhere I went. Every morning when I'd leave for work, there he was, watering the same plant by his door or checking his mailbox for the 3rd time. When I'd come home with groceries, he'd appear within seconds, offering to help carry bags up the stairs. At first, I appreciated the gesture. Being a single mom, any help was welcome. But then came the comments that made my stomach twist. He'd mention how tired I looked, suggesting I must have been up late again, always with this knowing look in his eyes. He even asked if I'd gotten new curtains for my bedroom, saying he noticed the lighting from my window looked different at night. The encounters escalated over the next few weeks in ways that seemed coincidental but felt deliberate. He started showing up at the neighborhood grocery store right when I was shopping, always finding me in the cereal aisle where Nathan liked to pick his breakfast. He joined the gym I'd been going to for 3 years, suddenly appearing on the treadmill next to mine, making small talk about workout routines while his eyes lingered too long. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon when Nathan was at soccer practice. Carl knocked on my door holding a package that he claimed was delivered to him by mistake. When I reached for it, he held it just out of reach, stepping closer to hand it over. That's when he said it. Something about how I should be careful about that small birthmark on my hip, that it looked like it might need checking by a doctor. My whole body went rigid. That birthmark was always covered by my clothes, except in certain photos I'd posted online. Photos that absolutely never showed my face or any identifying features of my apartment. I practically slammed the door in his face, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe he'd seen me at the pool last summer? But no, I always wore a one-piece. Maybe through my window? But my blinds were always closed when I changed. The more I thought about it, the more my panic grew. I went through my online content with a fine-tooth comb, checking every photo and video for any possible identifying information. My face was never visible. I'd been careful about reflections, and I'd even bought special sheets and decorations specifically for filming that were different from my everyday bedroom items. But then I remembered something that made my throat close up. In one recent video, I'd worn a new set of emerald green sheets that I'd actually put on my real bed afterward because they were so expensive. Carl had commented on those exact sheets just last week, saying through my door that he was glad to see I was treating myself to nice things. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. Nathan asked why I kept checking the locks, why I'd moved his old baseball bat next to my bed. I told him I'd heard about break-ins in the neighborhood, but the truth was eating me alive. After he went to sleep, I started investigating everything. I checked my laptop for malware, changed all my passwords, even put tape over my webcam. Then I remembered something from a true crime podcast about checking your Wi-Fi router for unknown devices. My heart pounded as I logged into the router settings, scrolling through the list of connected devices. My laptop, Nathan's tablet, our phones, the smart TV, all normal. But there, at the bottom, was something that made my entire body go cold. An unknown IP address, labeled only as device hidden. When I tried to identify it, the router showed it had been connected for over 3 months, consuming massive amounts of upload bandwidth. Whatever this device was, it had been transmitting something from my network, and it had been doing it since around the time Carl started acting strange. The next morning was Sunday, and Nathan had a sleepover at his friend's house. As soon as I dropped him off, I drove straight to the police station. The officer at the desk, a younger woman named Officer Daniels, initially seemed skeptical when I started explaining the situation. But when I showed her the router logs and told her about Carl's comments, her expression changed completely. She called in a detective, a man named Detective Reeves who specialized in cybercrimes. He took my statement, examined the screenshots I'd taken of the router settings, and said something that still haunts me. "This looks like a hidden camera setup. They usually connect to your Wi-Fi to transmit footage in real time." He explained that modern spy cameras are tiny, some no bigger than a button, and can be hidden almost anywhere. We arranged for officers to come to my apartment that afternoon with detection equipment. I met them outside my building, my legs feeling like jelly as we walked up the stairs. Detective Reeves had brought a special device that could detect wireless signals and hidden cameras. We started in the living room, the device making occasional beeping sounds near electronics, which he said was normal. The kitchen was clear, so was Nathan's room, thank God. But when we entered my bedroom, the device went crazy, emitting a high-pitched continuous tone near the wall opposite my bed. The detective moved it slowly along the wall until he pinpointed the source: my air conditioning vent. Using a screwdriver, he carefully removed the vent cover, and there it was. A tiny black device no bigger than a USB drive, with a small lens pointed directly at my bed. It had been positioned perfectly to capture everything, powered by a small battery pack and transmitting constantly through my own Wi-Fi. The detective carefully bagged it as evidence, his face grim as he told me they'd be able to trace exactly where the footage had been going. While Detective Reeves worked on his laptop in my living room, tracing the camera's transmission path, I sat on my couch feeling violated in ways I couldn't even articulate. Every private moment from the last 3 months flashed through my mind: changing clothes, sleeping. Those late-night content creation sessions I thought were secret. The detective's typing stopped abruptly, and he turned the screen toward me. The IP address matched exactly with one registered to the apartment directly below mine: Carl's apartment. The detective immediately called for backup, and within minutes, 3 more officers arrived. They had me stay upstairs with Officer Daniels while they went to confront Carl. From my window, I watched them knock on his door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Carl answered quickly, almost like he'd been expecting them, wearing that same friendly smile he always had. But I could see the moment his expression changed, when Detective Reeves showed him the warrant they'd obtained through an emergency judicial order. The search of Carl's apartment revealed a setup that made everyone involved sick to their stomachs. Detective Reeves later told me they found 3 monitors in Carl's bedroom, one dedicated entirely to the feed from my apartment. Hundreds of hours of footage were stored on external hard drives, meticulously organized by date and time. But the worst part was what they found in a locked folder on his computer. He'd been comparing my online content with the illegally recorded footage, using some kind of facial recognition software to confirm it was me. He had spreadsheets documenting my schedule, notes about when Nathan left for school, when I showered, when I worked out. There were even recordings from days when I was just sleeping or reading in bed, completely unaware that someone was watching my every move. The police found receipts showing he'd purchased the camera 6 months ago, but had only installed it after figuring out about my online work, which he'd discovered by using specialized software to track IP addresses from content creators in our area code. They arrested Carl right there in his apartment, and I watched from my window as they led him out in handcuffs. He looked up at my window just once, and the expression on his face wasn't anger or shame. It was disappointment, like I'd ruined some fantasy he'd built up in his head. The officers seized all his equipment as evidence, and Detective Reeves assured me Carl would be facing multiple felony charges, including invasion of privacy, cyberstalking, and illegal surveillance. What really got to me was when the detective mentioned that Carl had never actually subscribed to my content or paid for anything. He'd just been stealing these intimate moments from my real life, preferring the authentic, unguarded version of me to anything I posted online. The building manager was horrified when he found out, and immediately offered to let me break my lease without penalty. I found a new apartment across town within a week, making sure it was in a building with better security and no shared ventilation systems. The legal process took months, but Carl eventually pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He got 18 months in prison, 3 years probation, and a permanent restraining order. I had to close my online accounts and lost that income stream, but honestly, it was a relief. I picked up extra shifts at the dental office and found a weekend job doing medical transcription from home. Legitimate work that barely covers Nathan's tuition, but lets me sleep at night. Nathan never learned the full details, just that we moved because of a creepy neighbor situation. Sometimes I still check every vent in our new apartment, run my fingers along the edges looking for anything unusual. I bought a device that detects hidden cameras, and I sweep my bedroom twice a week, maybe more if I'm feeling anxious. People sometimes ask why I moved so suddenly, why I'm so careful about my privacy now. I just tell them you can never be too cautious these days. The truth is, I learned that the walls we think protect us can be paper thin, and sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who smile at you every morning while harboring obsessions you could never imagine. The divorce papers had been finalized in January 2023, and by March, reality hit hard. 32 years old, living in a cramped apartment outside Columbus, Ohio, and barely making ends meet at the auto shop where I'd worked for 8 years. Child support for my daughter Kayla took half my paycheck, and the other half disappeared into rent, groceries, and the mountain of credit card debt from when Jennifer and I were still pretending everything was fine. One night, after 3 beers and scrolling through my phone, an ad popped up about people making thousands on OnlyFans, and honestly, why not? I wasn't bad looking, 6 feet tall, decent shape from hauling engines all day, and according to my ex's friends who'd hit on me at barbecues, I had that rugged mechanic thing going for me. Setting up the account felt surreal, taking photos in my bathroom mirror, figuring out angles that didn't show the water stain on my ceiling. But within 2 weeks, I had 40 subscribers at $15 a month. Not life-changing money, but enough to finally fix my truck's transmission. For 3 months, everything ran like clockwork. Post a couple photos after work, maybe a video on weekends, answer some messages with the kind of flirty banter that made middle-aged women from Nebraska feel special. Most subscribers were respectful, just lonely people looking for connection, sending $10 or $20 tips with messages like, "Made my day handsome," or "Love a man who works with his hands." Then in late June, this account called GoldenEye369 subscribed and immediately stood out. No profile picture, no bio, just a generic username. But they tipped $200 on my welcome message without asking for anything special. Over the next week, they'd drop another 100 here, 50 there, always with vague compliments like, exactly what I was looking for or perfect choice, never requesting anything specific like the others did. The money was too good to question. In 2 weeks, GoldenEye 369 had sent me almost $800, enough to catch up on utilities and even take Kayla to Cedar Point for her 15th birthday. Everything changed on a humid Friday night in early July when GoldenEye 369 finally made their first real request, a private video call for $500, just 15 minutes. Nothing weird, just want to see you live. $500 for 15 minutes was more than I made in a day at the shop, and rent was due Monday, so I messaged back saying sure, we could set it up for 11 that night after I got home from my shift. They responded instantly with the payment and a link to some video platform I'd never heard of called Secure Stream, insisting we use that instead of OnlyFans' built-in video feature because they claim to have privacy concerns with the main platform. The site looked professional enough, required me to create an account with my email, and had me test my camera and microphone before the call. Everything seemed legitimate, just another paranoid rich person worried about their identity, which honestly made sense given how much money they were throwing around. At 11 on the dot, I clicked the call link, and the screen stayed black on their end while my camera showed my face clearly in the corner. They typed in the chat that their camera was broken, but they could see and hear me fine. For 15 minutes, I did what they asked. Took off my shirt, flexed a little, told some made-up story about a wild night in Vegas, exactly the kind of harmless fantasy content I'd been selling for months. GoldenEye 369 kept typing enthusiastic responses, sending another 200 in tips through the platform during the call, asking me to stand up, turn around, show different angles. Nothing that crossed any serious lines, but definitely more directing than most clients did. When the timer hit 15 minutes, they thanked me profusely, said I was absolutely perfect for what they needed, and the call ended automatically, leaving me $600 richer and feeling pretty good about the easiest money I'd ever made in my life. Saturday morning hit different. Woke up around 10 to my phone buzzing nonstop, and when I checked my email, there were 17 messages from an address I didn't recognize. Gotcha Forever 88 tier Proton Mail. The subject line on every single one just said, "Ryan, open this now," and my chest got tight before I even clicked the first one. The email had 3 attachments, crystal clear screenshots from last night's video call, showing me shirtless, mid-flex, face completely visible. And worst of all, in the corner of each image was my full name from the Secure Stream account I'd created. The message itself was short and brutal. "Nice show last night. $5,000 to Bitcoin wallet below by Monday noon. Or these go to Jennifer, your ex-wife's email was listed. Brennan Auto Repair, my boss's direct email. Columbus City Schools Administration, where Kayla went to school. And your Facebook friends list. They'd somehow grabbed all 847 names. At the bottom, they'd added one more line that made me run to the bathroom and throw up. We recorded everything, including the parts where you got more comfortable. Pay up or everyone sees who Ryan really is." I must have read that email 50 times, each time hoping the words would change, that maybe this was some sick joke or a nightmare I'd wake up from. $5,000. Might as well have been $5 million with my bank account showing $247 and change. Called my buddy Craig, who knew about computers, trying to stay vague, asking if emails could be traced or if Bitcoin was really anonymous like people said, and he just laughed and said whoever was blackmailing me probably knew what they were doing if they were using Proton and cryptocurrency. The screenshot quality was perfect too, not grainy or distorted. My face clear as day. The kind of images that would spread through my small suburb like wildfire, ending up on Kayla's classmates' phones by lunch period Monday. Started calculating desperately. I had 3 credit cards with maybe 2,000 total available credit. Could sell my PlayStation and watch for maybe 500. Had that old Mustang engine block in my garage worth 800 if I could find a buyer by tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, I could borrow the rest from my brother Doug if I made up some story about needing emergency car repairs. Sunday disappeared in a blur of pawn shops, Facebook marketplace meetups, and sketchy parking lots, and humiliating phone calls where I begged people for money without being able to explain why I really needed it. Sold the PlayStation to some college kid for $300. Way less than it was worth, but I needed cash immediately. Then drove 2 hours to Dayton because someone there would buy the Mustang engine block same day for $600. Doug came through with $1,500 after I fed him some story about needing to fix my truck's transmission, or I'd lose my job, and the guilt of lying to him hurt almost as much as the fear of those screenshots getting out. By Sunday night, I'd maxed out all 3 credit cards doing cash advances at different ATMs, paying those insane fees because what choice did I have? Sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, counting and recounting the crumpled bills and bank transfer confirmations. I had $4,047, still short, but maybe they'd take it. Maybe they'd understand I was trying, that this was literally everything I could scrape together without robbing a bank. Monday morning at 8 sharp, I sent my first email to GotchaForever88, explaining I had most of the money, begging for more time or to accept the $4,047 as final payment, promising I'd delete my OnlyFans and never do anything like this again. They responded in 12 minutes. Full amount or photos go out at noon, no negotiations. Clock's ticking, Ryan. In panic mode hit different this time. Called in sick to work. Drove to 3 different payday loan places. Got turned down at 2 for having too much existing debt. But the third one, this shady spot behind a liquor store, gave me $300 at some criminal interest rate I didn't even look at. Sold my spare tire and jack to a mechanic friend for $50. Found $40 in change in my couch and car. And at 11:47 a.m., I initiated the Bitcoin transfer for exactly $5,000. My entire life savings plus debt I'd be paying off for years, all gone in a single transaction to some anonymous wallet that could be anywhere in the world. The confirmation email came at 12:03 p.m. Payment received. Your secret is safe, for now. Those 3 dots after safe made my skin prickle because I knew, deep in my gut, that this wasn't over. That people who do this kind of thing don't just walk away after one score. For 2 weeks, though, life went back to something resembling normal. Went to work, picked up extra shifts to start paying Doug back, deleted OnlyFans and all my content, even changed my phone number and email address. Then Wednesday afternoon, while I was under a Honda Accord changing oil, Craig texted me that I had a visitor at the shop. And when I rolled out, there was a kid, couldn't have been more than 19, holding an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single printed screenshot I hadn't seen before, much more explicit than the others, time-stamped from later in that video call, along with a note. $2,000 by Friday or this one goes viral on Twitter with your full name and city. Previous payment only covered the first batch. This time I didn't panic, didn't scramble. I drove straight to the Columbus Police Department and asked to speak with someone about online blackmail. Detective Fowler, a woman about my age with tired eyes and coffee stains on her sleeve, took me to a small interview room and listened to the whole embarrassing story without judgment. She typed notes while I showed her the emails, the Bitcoin wallet address, the screenshots, everything except the actual content because I couldn't bear to show that to another human being. After 40 minutes, she leaned back and delivered the news that crushed whatever hope I'd carried into that building. The Proton Mail account was untraceable. Without a warrant, they'd never get approved. The Bitcoin wallet showed the money had already been moved through 6 different exchanges across 4 countries. And GoldenEye 369's OnlyFans account had been created using a VPN that bounced through servers in Romania, Vietnam, and Nigeria. These operations are usually run from countries where we have no jurisdiction, she explained, sliding me a pamphlet about cybercrime that felt like a sick joke. Even if we could identify them, which is nearly impossible, they're probably in a place where local law enforcement won't cooperate. Your best bet is to not pay anymore, document everything, and consider telling your close contacts before they do. I didn't pay the second demand, couldn't even if I wanted to. I was already drowning in debt from the first payment, working 70 hours a week just to cover minimums on the payday loans and credit cards. Friday came and went, and nothing happened. Then Saturday, Sunday, a whole week of silence that almost felt worse than getting the threats because at least then I knew where I stood. Every notification on my phone made my heart race. Every unknown number at work made me want to hide in the bathroom. And when Jennifer called about picking up Kayla for the weekend, I nearly threw up thinking she'd seen something online. The screenshots never surfaced on Twitter or anywhere else I could find. And after 3 weeks of obsessive Googling my own name, I started to think maybe they'd moved on to easier targets. Maybe Detective Fowler was right, and calling their bluff had worked. But that feeling of relief was poisoned because I knew they still had those videos, those screenshots, sitting on a hard drive somewhere across the world, and any day could be the day they decided to destroy my life for fun or profit, or just because they were bored. It's been 4 months now since that video call, and while nothing else has happened, no more emails, no more demands, no leaked content, I live with this constant weight in my chest that never fully goes away. Had to tell Jennifer about the debt when she questioned why I was late on child support twice. Made up a gambling problem that was easier to explain than the truth. And now she barely lets me see Kayla unsupervised, thinking I'm some degenerate who can't control himself. Changed jobs, moved apartments, deleted all social media, basically became a ghost trying to stay off anyone's radar. But every time I meet someone new, every time a coworker wants to connect on Instagram, or a woman at a bar asks for my number, I think about those files floating out there in the dark web ether, waiting. The other night, I got a spam email about cryptocurrency investment opportunities, completely unrelated to any of this. But seeing those words Bitcoin and anonymous in the subject line sent me into such a panic that I dry heaved in my bathroom for 20 minutes. That's the real horror of this whole thing. Not just what happened, but knowing it's never really over. That somewhere in the world, someone has a piece of me they can weaponize whenever they want. And all I can do is wait and hope they've forgotten I exist. Hope that I'm not worth their time anymore. Hope that one day I'll check my email without feeling like I'm going to pass out. The autumn of 2023 changed everything about how I see the internet, relationships, and trust. My senior year of engineering at a state university in Michigan was supposed to be about finishing strong, landing a job, and figuring out life with my girlfriend, Brooke. We'd been together since sophomore year, sharing a tiny off-campus apartment until she decided to get her own place closer to her nursing program. We'd meet up between classes at the campus coffee shop, spend weekends binge-watching shows, and plan our future after graduation. When she mentioned starting an OnlyFans account that September to help with her student loans, I tried to be supportive. She said it would just be simple content, nothing too explicit, just enough to make some extra cash. The way she explained it made sense, and honestly, her financial stress had been weighing on both of us for months. At first, everything seemed fine. Brooke would text me about her subscriber count going up, excited about the extra income finally letting her breathe financially. She bought new camera equipment, ring lights, and even splurged on some takeout for us both when we'd been living on ramen for weeks. But by early November, something shifted. Her responses to my texts became shorter, taking hours to reply when she used to answer within minutes. Our planned study sessions got canceled last minute, and when we did meet up, she kept checking her phone constantly, her face tense whenever a notification popped up. She started wearing long sleeves even indoors, claiming the library was freezing, and dark circles appeared under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. When I asked if everything was okay with the OnlyFans thing, she'd force a laugh and change the subject, saying the platform was just more time-consuming than she expected. The breaking point came on a Friday in mid-November. Brooke hadn't responded to any of my messages for 2 days, which had never happened before, not even during her most stressful exam weeks. I'd gone by her apartment twice, but her roommate Jasmine said she hadn't seen her either, just heard her door close late at night sometimes. That Friday afternoon, I decided to skip my thermodynamics lecture and go check on her again. Her building had this broken security door that never quite latched, so I let myself in and climbed to the 3rd floor. Standing outside her door, I could hear something playing inside. Sounded like music, or maybe a video. I knocked for almost 5 minutes, calling her name, even tried the handle knowing she sometimes forgot to lock it. The door swung open to an empty apartment, but her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, its screen casting this eerie blue glow across the dark room. What I saw on that screen made my whole body go numb. It was her OnlyFans streaming dashboard, still logged in, showing an active live stream with over 300 viewers. The video feed showed Brooke in some room I didn't recognize. Bare white walls, harsh fluorescent lighting, a mattress on the floor. She was talking to the camera, but something about her voice sounded wrong, too cheerful, almost scripted. Her eyes kept darting to something off-screen, and every few seconds she'd pause mid-sentence like someone was coaching her on what to say. The chat was going crazy with tips and requests, but she wasn't acknowledging any of them the way she usually did in her streams. I knew because I'd watched a few of her early ones to be supportive, and she always had this natural way of interacting with viewers. This wasn't that. This was something else entirely. I grabbed the laptop and sat down right there on her kitchen floor, trying to process what I was seeing. The stream continued, and I noticed details that made everything worse. Brooke's wrists had these faint red marks when she moved her arms certain ways, like she'd been restrained recently. Behind her cheerful expression, her jaw muscles kept clenching, and she'd occasionally blink in these rapid patterns, almost like Morse code. I started screen recording everything on my phone while frantically looking through the streaming dashboard for any location information. The account showed the stream originating from somewhere in Michigan, but the IP address kept changing every few minutes, bouncing between different cities. Her recent videos tab showed daily uploads for the past week, all filmed in that same stark room, all with that same forced enthusiasm. The payment history showed thousands of dollars in tips flowing in, but the withdrawal account had been changed 3 days ago to some cryptocurrency wallet I didn't recognize. I immediately called 911, my voice cracking as I tried to explain the situation to the dispatcher. They transferred me twice before someone finally took down the information, but I could tell from their tone they weren't taking it seriously. A missing person report couldn't be filed yet since it hadn't been 48 hours, and when I mentioned the live stream, they said if she was actively posting content, she probably wasn't missing. I drove straight to the police station with the laptop, demanding someone look at what I'd found. The desk sergeant barely glanced at the screen before telling me that relationship disputes weren't their priority, and that plenty of people in that line of work ghost their partners for safety reasons. Even when I showed him the red marks on her wrists, the strange blinking patterns, he just shrugged and said, "Rough content pays better." They took my information, gave me a case number, and essentially showed me the door. For the next 3 weeks, I became obsessed with finding her. I reached out to every person in her contacts, called her parents in Grand Rapids who hadn't heard from her but weren't worried because she often went weeks without calling. I spent entire nights analyzing the live stream recordings, mapping out the schedule of when new content got posted. Always between 2 and 4 a.m., always that same room, always that same forced performance. I tried reverse image searching screenshots, contacted other OnlyFans creators asking if they recognized the setup, even paid a private investigator my entire savings to look into it. He traced the cryptocurrency wallet to an exchange based in Eastern Europe, but hit dead ends after that. The live streams continued daily, and I watched every single one, looking for any clue about where she was. Sometimes there were muffled sounds in the background, footsteps, doors closing, once what sounded like a train passing by. I compiled everything into folders, timestamps, audio analysis I ran through free software, building this massive case file that nobody wanted to look at. By early December, the streams suddenly stopped. Her OnlyFans page went dark, no new content, no response to the hundreds of messages from subscribers asking where she went. I felt this mix of hope and dread. Maybe she'd escaped, or maybe something worse had happened. I kept checking the site obsessively, refreshing every hour, while also monitoring missing persons databases, hospital admission records I could access through a friend in med school, even checking Jane Doe reports, though I hated myself for doing it. Her apartment stayed empty, rent unpaid, until the landlord started the eviction process. I went through her things before they threw everything out, finding nothing except normal college student stuff, textbooks, clothes, a half-finished knitting project she'd been making for her mom's birthday. Jasmine told me Brooke had been getting weird packages delivered in the weeks before she disappeared. Small boxes she'd immediately take to her room, but the shipping labels were always torn off by the time they hit the recycling. Then, in late February 2024, her OnlyFans account came back to life. I got the notification at 3 a.m. while I was up studying for midterms, and seeing her username pop up on my phone made me physically sick. The new video was definitely recent. She was wearing a necklace I'd given her for Christmas, the one that had been in her jewelry box when I went through her apartment. But everything else about her had changed. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones sharp under the ring light, and there were these small scars on her shoulders that hadn't been there before. Her hair was shorter, dyed black instead of her natural brown, and she moved differently, more mechanical, like she was following choreographed steps. The room was different too, still bare walls, but now with a window visible in the corner showing city lights I couldn't identify. She never spoke in this video, just performed, but her eyes would occasionally flick toward the camera with this expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not fear exactly, but this hollow recognition, like she knew I might be watching. I downloaded the video immediately and spent hours analyzing every frame. In one brief moment, when she turned away from the camera, I caught a reflection in that window, the silhouette of someone else in the room, tall, standing perfectly still by what looked like a door. The metadata had been scrubbed clean, but there was this tiny detail everyone else probably missed. She was tapping her fingers against her leg in a pattern. I slowed it down, counted the taps, and realized she was spelling something out. It took me hours to decode it, playing the same 15-second segment over and over until my eyes burned. She was tapping out an address. Not perfectly, some numbers were unclear, but enough that I could narrow it down to a specific area in Detroit, about 2 hours from campus. My heart hammered as I mapped out potential buildings in that zone, cross-referencing with the city lights I could see in that window reflection, trying to triangulate which floor she might be on based on the angle. I drove to Detroit that same morning, skipping all my classes, running on nothing but gas station coffee and adrenaline. The area her tapping had indicated was a cluster of old industrial buildings, some converted to lofts, others still abandoned. I spent the entire day walking through those streets, looking up at windows, trying to match the view from her video. Around sunset, I found it, a 7-story building that had been partially converted into live workspaces, the kind that advertised month-to-month rentals with no credit checks. The 4th-floor corner unit had the exact same window configuration, the same angle toward the city lights. I waited outside until someone was leaving and caught the door, then made my way up the stairwell, my legs barely working from the fear and exhaustion. At the 4th floor, I could hear music coming from behind the corner unit's door, the same generic electronic beats that played in her recent videos. I called the police from the hallway, gave them the address, told them I had reason to believe someone was being held against their will. This time I didn't mention OnlyFans or streaming. I just said I'd heard screaming and suspicious sounds. They said they'd send someone. While waiting for the police, I kept my ear pressed against the door, and that's when I heard voices, at least 2 men speaking in a language I couldn't identify. And then, unmistakably, Brooke's laugh, but forced and too loud. 20 minutes later, 2 officers finally showed up, looking annoyed about the call. They knocked, announced themselves, and everything inside went silent instantly. After a long pause, a man opened the door just a crack, speaking perfect English with no accent, claiming he lived alone and hadn't heard any disturbances. The officers barely pushed, didn't ask to come in, Didn't question why I could still hear that music playing from inside. They told me to stop harassing residents and threatened to arrest me if I didn't leave immediately. As we walked away, I looked back and saw a figure in the window, just for a second, and I swear it was Brooke, pressing her palm flat against the glass before someone pulled her back into the darkness. I didn't give up. I contacted the FBI Cybercrime Division, filed reports with the National Human Trafficking Hotline, even reached out to journalists who covered similar cases. Most never responded, and those who did said they needed more concrete evidence than videos and speculation. I hired a different private investigator, one who specialized in these cases, and she actually made progress. She found that the apartment was rented under a shell company that traced back to a network of similar properties across the Midwest, all cash payments, all hosting young women who appeared on various cam sites. She said this was bigger than just Brooke, that there were probably dozens of girls caught in the same situation, but without law enforcement cooperation, there was nothing we could legally do. She advised me to keep documenting everything and wait for them to make a mistake. So I kept watching the streams, which now happened sporadically, maybe once a week. Each time, Brooke looked more distant, more automated, like whatever fight she'd had in her was slowly being drained away. The last stream I watched was in April 2024. She looked directly at the camera at one point, really looked. Not the empty performance stare, but genuine eye contact, and mouthed 2 words: "Stop watching." I understood what she meant. My obsession wasn't helping her. It was just feeding the system that held her. I closed the laptop, deleted my account, and stopped checking. I filed one final police report with everything I'd gathered, sent copies to 3 different FBI field offices, and then tried to return to my life. I graduated that May with a degree I could barely remember earning. I still check missing persons sites sometimes, still jump when I see women who look like her from behind. Her OnlyFans account is still active as far as I know. Friends have told me they've seen new content posted, but I keep my promise not to look. Sometimes I dream about that moment at the window, her hand pressed against the glass, and I wake up wondering if there was something more I could have done, some authority I didn't contact, some evidence I missed. All I know is that she's still out there somewhere, performing for strangers, and the system that took her continues operating in plain sight, while everyone pretends not to see. Phoenix gets unbearably hot in July, and my tiny studio apartment near Camelback Road had the worst air conditioning you could imagine. Brandon had been gone for 3 weeks by then, and I was still finding his stuff everywhere. A phone charger behind the nightstand, his favorite hot sauce in the back of the fridge, one of his socks stuck to the inside of the dryer. My sister Grace had helped me move out while he was at work, stuffing my entire life into her pickup truck in under 2 hours. We'd been together 4 years, and leaving felt like ripping off my own skin. The locks were changed the same day I moved in, and every notification on my phone still made my chest tighten, expecting another one of his rage-filled texts somehow breaking through the blocks I'd set up on everything. Creating an OnlyFans account wasn't something I'd planned, but my friend Melody had been doing it for months and clearing more than her nursing salary. The afternoon I set up my profile, I remember sitting cross-legged on my second-hand couch, laptop heating up my thighs, thinking about how Brandon would absolutely lose his mind if he knew. That thought made me smile for the first time in weeks, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because for once I was doing something purely for myself, something he couldn't control or criticize. My fingers trembled slightly as I uploaded the first photos, nothing too wild. Just some lingerie shots Melody had helped me take against the exposed brick wall in my bedroom. Within 3 days, I had 40 subscribers, and by the end of the second week, I was making enough to cover half my rent. Everything changed on a Wednesday morning when I woke up to a comment on one of my posts from a user called Desert Watcher 62. The message itself seemed harmless enough. Love the way you bite your lip when you're nervous. But something about it made my stomach churn. Brandon always used to point out that habit. said it drove him crazy in both good and bad ways. I told myself I was being paranoid, that lots of guys probably noticed things like that, but then more comments started appearing from the same account. That birthmark on your hip looks like a crescent moon in this lighting. Only someone who'd seen me up close would know about that birthmark, hidden as it was just below my bikini line. You still sleep on the left side of the bed, I see. The photo he commented on showed only a corner of my mattress, but he was right. The comments got more specific over the next few days, each one a little needle of recognition that made my whole body tense up. Remember when you wore that color to Sedona? Under a photo in a red lingerie set. Brandon and I had gone to Sedona for our anniversary 2 years ago, and I'd worn a red dress he'd picked out. You always did look best at 3 a.m. appeared under a late-night post, and I remembered all those fights that lasted until dawn, him telling me I was beautiful even while calling me horrible names in the same breath. Desert Watcher 62 never said anything explicitly threatening, never crossed any obvious lines, but each comment felt like a fingernail dragging across my brain, leaving marks only I could see. My dad called me on a Friday afternoon while I was grocery shopping at the Safeway on McDowell Road, his voice strange and tight in a way I'd never heard before. "Honey, we need to talk about something," he said, and I abandoned my half-full cart right there in the cereal aisle. He told me that someone had sent an email to his work address, the one listed on his company's website, with screenshots from my OnlyFans page attached. The subject line read, "Thought you should see what your daughter is up to these days." Mom had gotten one too, sent to her personal Gmail with the message, "Such a shame about Lisa, she seemed like such a nice girl." The screenshots were the tamest ones on my profile, just me in lingerie, but they'd been edited with red circles around certain parts of my body and arrows pointing to details with typed notes like mole on left shoulder and scar from bike accident age 12. Whoever sent them knew things about my body that you'd only notice after years of intimacy. Grace got hers the next morning, sent to her work email at the dental office where she was a hygienist, right before her Saturday shift. This one was different though. It included a photo I'd never posted anywhere. One from my phone that I'd taken but decided against uploading. It was me trying on lingerie in my bathroom mirror, my face fully visible, a test shot from weeks ago. The only way someone could have that photo was if they had access to my phone or my cloud storage. My password was one Brandon could never guess. I'd made sure of that, but he'd always been weirdly good with technology, used to brag about teaching himself to code and hack when he was younger. The email to Grace said, "Your sister should be more careful with her privacy settings," and included a link to my OnlyFans page with the message, "Family discount available." I filed a police report that same afternoon at the Phoenix Police Department station on Washington Street, sitting in a plastic chair that stuck to the back of my thighs, while Officer Garrett typed slowly on his computer. He kept asking if I had any proof it was Brandon, and all I could offer were the comments that referenced things only he would know. "Could be a coincidence," he said, not even looking up from his screen. "Lots of people have obsessive fans online these days." But then he pulled up Brandon's record, and his eyebrows went up slightly. Turns out Brandon was on probation for a harassment charge from his previous girlfriend, something he'd never told me about. Officer Garrett made a call to Brandon's probation officer, a woman named Diane Walters who sounded tired even at 2 in the afternoon. Brandon had checked in with her that morning, claiming he was in Flagstaff for a construction job. Had even sent her a selfie in front of what looked like a job site with mountains in the background. The security footage changed everything though. Officer Garrett called me 3 days later, asked me to come back to the station immediately. They'd pulled video from the convenience store across from my apartment complex, and there was Brandon's silver Ford F-150, clear as day, parked in their lot for 3 hours the previous Monday night. The timestamp showed him arriving at 11:47 p.m. and leaving at 2:53 a.m., just sitting there in the dark with a perfect view of my bedroom window. The same night I'd done a live stream for my subscribers, the first one I'd ever done, wearing a silk robe Melody had bought me as a congratulations gift. They had footage from 4 different nights over the past 2 weeks, always the same pattern: arriving late, parking in that exact spot, leaving after exactly 3 hours. One night, the camera caught him getting out to throw away what looked like fast food containers, and his face was perfectly visible in the fluorescent light of the store's sign. Getting the restraining order felt like winning a small war, the judge signing it without hesitation, after seeing the surveillance footage and the emails to my family. Brandon showed up to court wearing the same cologne he'd worn on our first date, that woody scent that used to make me feel safe and now made me want to throw up. He kept trying to make eye contact while his lawyer argued that the emails could have come from anyone, that sitting in a public parking lot wasn't illegal. But the judge, a woman with steel gray hair and glasses on a chain, wasn't buying it. "Mr. Coleman," she said, using his last name like it tasted bad, "you're on probation for similar behavior. You lied to your probation officer about your whereabouts, and you were surveilling your ex-girlfriend's residence. The temporary restraining order is granted." Brandon's jaw clenched the way it used to right before he'd punch a wall, and his lawyer put a hand on his shoulder to keep him seated. That night I thought maybe I could breathe again, even celebrated with melody over cheap wine in my kitchen, laughing about how his lawyer's toupee kept sliding backward every time he gestured. But 2 days later, a new account started commenting on my posts. Sunset Driver 88 this time. "That wine looks like the kind you can only get at Total Wine on Bell Road, the barefoot brand you always loved." I hadn't posted any pictures with wine, but there was a glass barely visible in the corner of one photo, so blurry you'd have to zoom in to even notice it was there. Then came Phoenix native 45 a week later. "Your new couch looks uncomfortable. Bet the old one was better." The couch he was referring to was the one we'd bought together at a furniture outlet in Tempe, the one I'd left behind because it smelled like him and had a cigarette burn from one of his drunk nights. The new accounts kept coming like clockwork, each lasting about a week before I could report and block them, each with those specific comments that felt like invisible hands around my throat. Valley Resident 77 knew about the nightmare I'd had about drowning when I was 10, commenting, "Water scenes might trigger you, careful under a shower video." Arizona Sun 23 mentioned the exact shade of nail polish I'd worn to his brother's wedding. That coral color never did match your skin tone. I started keeping a spreadsheet of all the usernames, the comments, the timestamps, bringing everything to Officer Garrett, who said they were building a case but needed more concrete evidence linking them to Brandon. The IP addresses were all different, bouncing through VPNs and proxy servers, but the writing style was always the same. That passive-aggressive tone I'd lived with for 4 years. The backhanded observations disguised as compliments, the little digs that seemed innocent unless you knew the context. My OnlyFans income had doubled by then, enough that I could afford to move to a better apartment complex in Scottsdale with actual security gates and cameras, but I still see those usernames in my sleep sometimes. Brandon got arrested 2 months later when he violated probation by approaching Grace at her gym, asking about me, but he posted bail the next day. The detective assigned to my case says they're close to charging him with cyberstalking, that the digital forensics team found evidence on his laptop, but these things take time. Last week, a new account appeared. Desert Memories 2024, and the first comment simply said, "Nice new place, better locks than the last one." I've changed my locks twice since moving here, installed extra security cameras, even got a German shepherd named Bruno who barks at everything. But every time I post new content, I wonder which username is him, which seemingly supportive comment is actually him letting me know he's still watching, still obsessed, still unable to let go. Everyone in Stillwater knew me as the girl who made the perfect oat milk latte at Common Grounds, that little coffee shop on Main Street with the exposed brick walls and hanging plants everywhere. I'd been working there since dropping out of college 2 years ago, saving up money while taking online classes for my accounting degree. The pay wasn't great, barely covering rent for my studio apartment above the antique shop, but the tips kept me afloat, and the regular customers felt like family. Most mornings, I'd open the shop at 6, watching the town wake up through the big front window, while the espresso machine hissed and the first batch of muffins filled the air with warmth. Life felt simple and predictable in the best way possible. Just me and my cat Oliver in our little routine. Nobody knew about the OnlyFans account except my best friend Ashley, who lived in Dallas. And that's exactly how I wanted to keep it. My mom still thought I was saving myself for marriage, and half the town probably assumed the same thing about the quiet barista who wore oversized sweaters and kept to herself. The account started as a joke, honestly. Something Ashley and I laughed about after too much wine during a video call one Friday night in early October. She'd been doing it for months, making enough to pay off her student loans, posting mostly feet pics and the occasional lingerie shot, nothing too wild. I figured why not try it for a month, see if I could make some extra cash for Christmas presents, and maybe finally fix the rattling noise in my Toyota Camry. The username Coffee Bean Queen seemed clever at the time, playing off my day job without being too obvious, and I kept my face out of most photos, just showing my tattoo of a moon phase down my spine and the birthmark on my hip that looked like a tiny butterfly. Within 3 days, somehow, the account exploded with thousands of followers, way more than Ashley had ever gotten, and the money started rolling in faster than I could process. By the end of the first week, I'd made more than my monthly salary at the coffee shop, all from posting pictures that seemed tame compared to what most creators were doing. Everything changed on a Wednesday morning in late October when I noticed something weird at work. 3 guys I'd never seen before came in together, ordered plain black coffees, and sat in the corner booth for over 2 hours. They kept glancing at me behind the counter, leaning in close to whisper to each other, and one of them had his phone angled in my direction the entire time. When I went to clear a nearby table, I heard one of them say, "Coffee Bean Queen," clear as day, followed by quiet laughter that made my chest tighten. They left exact change on the table, $15 for 3 coffees that cost $9 total, and on the receipt they'd written my username in blue pen with a winking face next to it. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe they were talking about actual coffee or some inside joke, but deep down I knew they'd found me. The next few days brought more strangers to common grounds. Always men, always in groups of 2 or 3, always ordering the cheapest thing on the menu and camping out for hours. They'd position themselves where they could watch me work, some pretending to read newspapers while obviously taking photos, others bold enough to aim their phones directly at me when I bent down to get supplies from the lower shelves. My regular customers started noticing too, especially Harold, who'd been coming in every morning since his wife died 5 years ago, asking me if those boys were bothering me and offering to have a word with them. But what could I say? That strangers from the internet were stalking me at my minimum wage job because they'd seen me in lingerie online? I just smiled and said they were probably just passing through town, even though we both knew nobody just passed through Stillwater without a reason. By the second week of November, the situation had gotten completely out of control. Every shift felt like being on display at some twisted zoo, with new faces appearing daily, all of them knowing exactly who I was underneath my green apron and coffee-stained jeans. They started getting creative with their payments, leaving $20 bills with "Show us more" written in the margins, or sliding $50 across the counter for a $3 coffee while maintaining uncomfortably long eye contact. One guy wearing a Cowboys jersey and reeking of cigarettes actually had the nerve to ask if I did private shows, right there at the register with other customers waiting behind him. My manager, Keith, sweet old Keith, who treated me like his granddaughter, started scheduling himself for more shifts after he caught a group of them following me to my car after closing. He never asked questions, just started walking me out every night, his hand hovering near the baseball bat he kept behind the counter. The breaking point came when I found an envelope under my windshield wiper after my shift on a Monday night. Inside were printed screenshots from my OnlyFans page, the ones where you could see my moon phase tattoo clearly, along with a handwritten note that said, "We know where you live, Coffee Bean Queen," and a photo of my apartment building taken from across the street. My fingers went numb holding that paper, standing there in the empty parking lot behind common grounds, while the streetlight flickered above me like something out of a horror movie. That night I deleted everything. The OnlyFans account, the separate Instagram I'd made for it, the Cash App, all of it gone with shaking fingers while Oliver meowed at me from his perch on the bathroom sink. I thought that would end it, that these creeps would lose interest once the content stopped, move on to harassing some other girl trying to make ends meet. God, I actually believed that would be enough to make them stop. The harassment only got worse after I went offline. The regular groups of men at the coffee shop turned aggressive, demanding to know why I'd deleted my account, asking what they'd done wrong, as if stalking me at my workplace was somehow reasonable behavior. They started leaving bigger tips with messages that progressed from desperate to threatening. "Come back, baby," turned into "You owe us," turned into "We paid for you," scrawled on $100 bills that I refused to touch. Keith installed new security cameras and started keeping the police non-emergency number taped next to the register. But what were we supposed to tell them? That customers were leaving large tips? That men were drinking coffee while looking at me? Everything they did danced right on the edge of legal, careful not to cross any lines that would get them arrested. Even when 5 of them showed up wearing matching red baseball caps with CBQ embroidered on them, the cops who responded said, unless they made explicit threats or touched me, it was just an unusual fashion choice. Then came that Friday morning in mid-November, when I walked out to my car at 5:30 to head to work, and saw what they'd done. Someone had keyed "Come back online" across the driver's side door in jagged, angry letters that cut through the silver paint down to the metal. The windshield had a crack running from corner to corner, deliberate and precise, and they'd stuffed printed photos under every wiper. Pictures from my account that I thought were gone forever. Pictures of me walking to my car. Pictures of me through my apartment window watering my plants. I called the police right there in my parking lot, sobbing into the phone while my elderly neighbor peered through her curtains, and Officer Brennan showed up 20 minutes later looking annoyed about being called out so early. He took photos half-heartedly, wrote down my statement in chicken scratch, and then asked me why I'd been posting pictures online if I didn't want attention. Actually said those words while I stood there in my work uniform with my vandalized car behind me. Keith gave me the rest of the day off and drove me to the police station himself. His jaw clenched the entire ride while I explained everything from the beginning. At the station, we waited 3 hours to speak with a detective, sitting on hard plastic chairs while drunk drivers and petty thieves were processed faster than my stalking case. Detective Mills finally called us back, a woman about my mother's age with kind eyes who actually listened, took real notes, and promised to look into it immediately. She said she'd review the security footage from common grounds, interview the men if they showed up again, and patrol my apartment complex more frequently. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was taking this seriously, like maybe I could get my life back and these psychos would face consequences. Mills even gave me her direct number, told me to call if anything else happened, and said she'd personally handle my case from start to finish. The hope lasted exactly 4 days, until Detective Mills called me during my lunch break, with a voice completely different from our first meeting. She said the investigation had hit some complications, that the security footage was inconclusive, that without direct threats or physical assault, there wasn't much they could do legally. Her words came out stilted and rehearsed, like someone was standing next to her desk coaching her through the conversation. When I pressed her about what changed, why she was suddenly backing off when she'd been so supportive before, she went quiet for a long moment before saying that I should be careful about making accusations against people in town, that sometimes these situations resolve themselves if we don't escalate them. After she hung up, Keith overheard me crying in the break room and finally told me what everyone else already seemed to know. One of the guys in the red CBQ caps was Jordan Hutchison, Sheriff Hutchison's youngest son, the one who'd gotten away with 2 DUIs and a bar fight because Daddy ran the whole department. After finding out about Jordan, something shifted in me from fear to pure rage. These weren't just random creeps from the internet anymore. This was the sheriff's son and his buddies treating me like their personal entertainment, knowing full well that Daddy's badge would protect them from any consequences. I started documenting everything obsessively, taking photos of every threatening tip, recording license plates, saving security footage on my own phone since I knew the official investigation was dead. Keith and Harold formed a kind of unofficial protection squad, taking turns sitting in the coffee shop during my shifts, and Ashley drove down from Dallas twice to stay with me. When the hang-up calls got so bad, I had to unplug my phone. The other baristas started walking me to my car in groups, and my neighbor started letting her German Shepherd out whenever she heard footsteps near my apartment. The whole thing felt like some sick game where everyone knew the rules except me, where Jordan and his crew could terrorize me while the entire police force looked the other way. The last straw came on a Saturday night after Thanksgiving when they crossed the final line. I woke up at 2 in the morning to Oliver hissing at my bedroom window, his fur standing straight up as he pawed at the glass. Through the thin curtains, I could see the silhouette of someone standing on my fire escape. Just standing there, not moving, not trying to break in, just watching. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but when I looked back, there were 2 more silhouettes, and one of them was holding up a sign that said "Last Chance" in bold red letters. The terror that went through me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt, knowing these men knew exactly where I slept, had climbed up to my second-floor window, and felt bold enough to just stand there knowing I couldn't do anything about it. I called Keith instead of the police, and he showed up with Harold and 3 other regulars from the coffee shop, all of them armed with baseball bats and flashlights, chasing the shadows away while I packed everything I could fit in my car. By sunrise, I was driving out of Stillwater with Oliver crying in his Carrier, my entire life shoved into trash bags, leaving behind my job, my apartment, and any sense of safety I'd ever had. Keith wired me my last paycheck plus a bonus he insisted wasn't charity, and Harold slipped $500 in an envelope through my car window despite my protests, telling me to get far away and never tell anyone where I went. That was 8 months ago, and I'm writing this from a state I won't name, in a city I won't identify, working at a job that has nothing to do with coffee. I changed my name legally, dyed my hair black, and even looked into tattoo removal for the moon phases down my spine, though I haven't gone through with it yet because it feels like letting them win completely. Sometimes I Google Jordan Hutchison and see he's still in Stillwater, probably still wearing those red caps with his buddies, maybe terrorizing some other girl who made the mistake of thinking she could make extra money online without becoming prey. Keith emails me occasionally from a burner account to let me know they still come by common ground sometimes, asking about the girl who used to work there, but he tells them I moved to Canada or California or wherever seems furthest from the truth that day. The money I made from those few weeks on OnlyFans sits untouched in an account I'm afraid to access, blood money that cost me my home, my peace of mind, and my ability to trust that the world has any justice in it. I still wake up at 2 in the morning sometimes, expecting to see silhouettes at my window, and Oliver still hisses at shadows that probably aren't there. But at least I'm alive, which is more than I was sure I'd be that night on the fire escape. And maybe that's the best ending a story like this can have. Chicago in late spring always had this energy that made me feel like anything was possible. And at 24, my OnlyFans career was finally taking off after months of grinding to build my subscriber base. The notification came through Instagram on a Wednesday afternoon while I was editing content in my apartment near Wicker Park, a message from Valentina Rose, who had over 300,000 followers and was basically royalty in our community. She said she'd been following my work for months and loved my aesthetic, wanted to do a collaboration shoot that weekend to help us both reach new audiences, and had already booked an Airbnb in the suburbs specifically for creating content. The message had that blue verification checkmark. Her profile looked exactly right with all her recent posts, and when I checked her story, she'd even posted about doing collabs with Chicago creators that week. so everything seemed perfectly legitimate and professional. The Airbnb was about 40 minutes outside the city in some wealthy suburb I'd never heard of, one of those places where every house sits on at least an acre, and the nearest neighbor is barely visible through the trees. I remember pulling up to this massive modern house with floor-to-ceiling windows, thinking how perfect the natural light would be for shooting, and noticing that Valentina's car wasn't in the driveway yet, even though we'd agreed to meet at 2 in the afternoon. The front door was unlocked, just like she'd said it would be in her last message, and inside the place was stunning. Marble countertops, a huge sectional couch, professional ring lights already set up in what looked like the main shooting area, and this weird chemical smell that I figured was just from recent cleaning. I texted Valentina that I'd arrived and started unpacking my outfits in one of the bedrooms, arranging everything on the bed while waiting for her to show up, checking my phone every few minutes as that uncomfortable feeling started creeping into my chest. About 20 minutes later, I heard voices coming from downstairs and felt this wave of relief, thinking Valentina had finally arrived with maybe her photographer or assistant. But when I walked into the living room, there were 2 men I'd never seen before. One tall and lanky with a scraggly beard who introduced himself as Marcus, and another shorter, stockier guy with thick glasses who said his name was Phil. They both wore these matching black polo shirts with some production company logo I didn't recognize, and Marcus immediately started explaining how Valentina had sent them ahead to get everything ready, that she was running late from another shoot in the city, but would definitely be here within the hour. Phil was already adjusting the ring lights and checking angles with his phone, talking about how they'd been Valentina's production team for over a year, how they'd helped her grow from 50,000 to 300,000 followers with their marketing strategies and professional editing. And honestly, they seemed to know so much about her content and her shooting style that my initial wariness started to fade a bit. Marcus pulled out an iPad and started showing me this whole presentation about their production company, scrolling through behind-the-scenes photos from other shoots they claimed to have done with big creators, talking about distribution deals and exclusive platform partnerships that could triple my income within 6 months. The weird thing was how much they knew about my content specifically. They referenced posts I'd made weeks ago, knew my upload schedule, even mentioned some of my regular subscribers by their usernames, which should have been a massive red flag, but somehow just made them seem more professional and prepared at the time. Phil kept adjusting equipment in the background, setting up additional cameras at different angles, and I noticed he'd locked the front door, which he said was for privacy and to make sure no delivery people or anyone else would interrupt the shoot. And that made sense, but also made my chest feel tight in a way I tried to ignore. Then Marcus brought out this thick contract, maybe 15 or 20 pages, saying it was standard procedure for all of Valentina's collaborations and that we needed to get the paperwork done before she arrived so we could start shooting immediately when she got here. The document was full of legal language about content rights, distribution terms, something about perpetual licensing and derivative works. And when I said I wanted to read through it carefully or maybe have someone look at it first, Phil laughed and said every minute we waited was costing them money in rental fees and equipment time. Marcus kept pushing the iPad toward me, pointing at signature lines with his pen, saying how Valentina would be offended if she showed up and found out I didn't trust her team, how this opportunity might not come again, and how they had 3 other creators lined up who would jump at this chance if I wasn't interested. The pressure was so intense and coordinated, with Phil standing behind me, while Marcus leaned in from the side, both of them talking over each other about deadlines and opportunities and how successful I was going to be after this collaboration. I told them I needed to use the bathroom just to get some space and think, and once I was in there with the door locked, I texted Valentina directly asking if these guys were really her team, but the message wouldn't deliver. It just sat there with that single gray check mark. My cellular signal was showing full bars, but nothing was going through, not even regular text messages to my roommate, and when I tried to check Valentina's Instagram again, her entire profile was suddenly showing as user not found, which made absolutely no sense since I'd been messaging with her just hours before. Through the bathroom door, I could hear Marcus and Phil talking in low voices, something about getting everything ready and the other equipment in the van. And that's when every instinct in my body started screaming that I needed to get out of that house immediately, contract or no contract, collaboration or no collaboration. When I came out of the bathroom, I kept my phone in my hand and tried to stay calm, while telling them I'd just gotten an emergency call from my roommate about a water leak in our apartment and needed to leave immediately. Marcus's whole demeanor shifted. His friendly salesman smile disappeared, and he stepped between me and the hallway that led to the bedroom where all my stuff was, saying we could just do a quick 15-minute shoot. Nothing elaborate, just enough to make the trip worthwhile for everyone. Phil had moved closer to the front door, still holding one of those professional cameras, and he started recording video right then without asking, pointing it directly at my face while saying something about needing test footage for lighting. The way they'd positioned themselves in the room felt deliberate and practiced, like they'd done this exact same thing before, and I realized that getting to my equipment bag with my car keys inside meant having to push past Marcus, who probably had 50 pounds and 6 inches on me. Instead of trying to get my things, I did something that probably saved me. I pretended to get a FaceTime call, holding my dead phone up to my face and having a whole fake conversation with my roommate about the flooding, loud enough for them to hear me describing exactly where I was, and mentioning that my location was being tracked. Marcus and Phil exchanged this quick look, and Phil actually stepped away from the door for just a second to whisper something to Marcus, which gave me the opening I needed to walk quickly toward the exit, still fake talking on my phone about how I'd be home in exactly 40 minutes and to make sure the landlord documented everything. My hand was on the door handle when Marcus called out that I was making a huge mistake, that Valentina would blacklist me from the entire creator community, but I didn't care. I yanked the door open and practically ran to my car, my keys thankfully still in my jacket pocket from when I'd arrived. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of adrenaline and paranoia, constantly checking my rearview mirror to make sure no one was following me, and it wasn't until I hit the city limits that my phone suddenly came back to life with a flood of notifications. There were 17 unread messages from my roommate Alexis wondering where I was, a bunch of Instagram notifications, and when I finally pulled over at a Walgreens parking lot to check everything properly, I discovered that the original message thread with Valentina Rose was completely gone from my Instagram inbox. Her verified account was back online, but when I clicked on it, her last post was from 3 days ago in Miami, nowhere near Chicago. And when I sent her a direct message asking about the collaboration, she replied within minutes saying she had no idea what I was talking about, had never messaged me, and had been dealing with someone hacking verified accounts to set up fake collaborations. The real Valentina was actually incredibly helpful, explaining that there'd been a string of these incidents lately targeting smaller creators, and she even offered to post a warning about it to her followers, which made me feel slightly less insane about the whole situation. 3 days later, while I was still processing everything and had just finished filing a police report that the officers barely took seriously, my best friend Alexis called me in hysterics, saying I needed to check my computer immediately. Someone had uploaded 7 videos to various adult sites using my face and exact body type, but the content itself was completely fabricated using some kind of AI or deepfake technology. The videos showed someone who looked exactly like me doing things I'd never done, in rooms I'd never been in, with people I'd never met. The attention to detail was terrifying. They'd even replicated a small birthmark on my shoulder, and the way I typically styled my hair, and the videos were tagged with my actual creator name and linked to fake social media profiles that used my real photos. The worst part was that some of my actual subscribers had already found these videos and were messaging me asking if I'd started doing more extreme content, and no matter how many reports I filed with the platforms, new videos kept appearing on different sites faster than they could be taken down. The investigation went nowhere for weeks until another creator from Milwaukee reached out, saying she'd gotten the exact same collaboration invite from a different verified account, and had also gone to a house where 2 men were waiting with contracts and cameras. She'd been smarter than me, though, She'd brought her boyfriend who waited in the car, and when things felt wrong, she had him come to the door pretending to be looking for directions, which spooked the men enough that she could leave safely. Together, we found 4 more women with identical stories, all OnlyFans creators with between 10 and 50,000 followers, all invited by hacked verified accounts, all pressured to sign contracts with that same perpetual licensing language, and 2 others besides me who'd had deepfake content uploaded after refusing to cooperate. We created a private group chat to share information and realized the houses were always expensive Airbnb rentals paid for with stolen credit cards. The men used different names each time, but the descriptions matched, and every single one of us had noticed that strange chemical smell, which we later learned was probably some kind of signal jammer that had been blocking our phones from working properly inside the houses. Eventually, with the help of a cybersecurity expert one of the girls knew, we traced the deepfake videos back to a Telegram group with over 8,000 members where people were sharing custom content of various creators, taking requests for specific scenarios, and selling packages of these fake videos for cryptocurrency. The group had detailed guides on finding targets, hacking verified Instagram accounts, setting up fake collaboration meetings, and using the footage they managed to record, even just test shots or regular conversation, to train their deepfake programs to make more convincing videos. After months of working with the FBI's cybercrime division and dealing with endless platform reports and DMCA takedowns, they finally arrested 6 people running the operation across 3 states, though the damage to my reputation and mental health was already done, and I still get messages from people who've seen those fake videos floating around the darker corners of the internet, reminding me that once something exists online, it never really goes away no matter how hard you fight to erase it. Rent in Melbourne had reached a point where surviving on my part-time barista job felt like a cruel joke. I shared a small apartment on Lygon Street with my friend Claire, who worked nights at a bookstore. Between the 2 of us, we could barely afford groceries. When my student debt reminder came in the mail, I decided to try something that made me cringe at first, selling feet photos online. It sounded ridiculous, but I figured it was harmless. No face, no name, just a username and a few pictures taken on my phone. At first, it went surprisingly well. I posted a few shots, kept my page subtle, and soon had a handful of regulars. I never shared personal details, not even what city I was in. The anonymity felt like armor. It even became kind of funny, strangers tipping me $20 just for painted toenails. It was strange money, but it paid for groceries and bills. I never interacted much with anyone, except for one guy who called himself Gentle Steps. He was polite, always complimented my photos, never crossed boundaries, until he did. The flowers arrived on a quiet afternoon in early autumn. They were white lilies, my favorite, though I had never mentioned that anywhere online. The card had no name, only my username, written in clean, almost formal handwriting. I laughed it off at first, thinking Claire had done it as a joke. But when she came home, she swore she had nothing to do with it. That night, I kept staring at the card on the counter, wondering how anyone could have found my address. It didn't make sense. 2 days later, I received another delivery. This time, a small box with a keychain shaped like a foot. That one sent a chill down my spine. There was no note, no return address, just my apartment number written neatly in black marker. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every sound from the hallway made my chest tighten. Claire thought I was being paranoid, but something about that keychain felt personal, like a warning rather than a gift. A week later, I came home from work to find the hallway light flickering. Claire was out, and the apartment felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was waiting for something. I noticed the lilies had started to rot, their petals brown at the edges, filling the room with a sweet, sour smell. I was picking them up to throw them away when I heard a soft scrape at the front door. It was slow, deliberate, like metal brushing metal. I froze for a second before whispering, "Hello?" No answer. Then the sound came again, closer to the lock this time. I grabbed my phone and called Claire, whispering into the receiver while staring at the handle. The noise stopped. I stayed by the door, not breathing, until I heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. When Claire got home 20 minutes later, we checked the peephole. The corridor was empty. I wanted to call the police, but she convinced me to wait. Maybe it was a neighbor, maybe someone drunk. I almost believed her until the next morning, when I opened the door to leave for work and saw the photos. Dozens of printed copies of my own OnlyFans pictures taped to the door. Some were cut unevenly, like they'd been printed from screenshots. And right in the center, one had a red marker circle around my ankle tattoo. The police came quickly after that. They dusted for fingerprints, asked the usual questions, and left with the photos in plastic bags. When they said there were no prints besides mine, I remember laughing because it felt absurd. Someone had been right there, touching my door, and yet it was like they didn't exist. One of the officers suggested that maybe a delivery service had mixed up packages, or that it was a prank. But the look on the younger officer's face told me he didn't buy that either. For the next few days, I didn't leave the apartment alone. Claire started sleeping on the couch to keep me company. I logged into my OnlyFans, deleted most of the posts, and set everything to private. But then curiosity got the better of me. I remembered that website I'd used to send small gifts to my top subscribers. Little thank yous, like digital gift cards or postcards. It claimed to be anonymous, keeping personal info hidden from both sides. I opened the order history, my hands trembling slightly, and saw something that made my throat dry. One of my top fans, the same username, Gentle Steps, had sent dozens of gifts to other women, and all of them had the same billing address. His address. At first, I thought it was some kind of glitch, maybe a shared account, maybe a scam. But when I clicked the profile linked to his orders, my stomach turned. The same username had been active on other creators' pages, some of whom I actually recognized from group chats. I reached out to one of them, a girl named Tessa from Brisbane, and she told me she'd also received flowers. The exact same kind, white lilies, with her username on the card. She hadn't told anyone either. That was the moment I realized this wasn't random. Someone had been watching us all. I sent everything I had to the police, screenshots, the billing address, the list of usernames. They told me they'd forward it to cybercrime investigators, but I could tell from their tone that they didn't think it would lead anywhere. The address belonged to a man in his late 30s with no criminal record. Apparently, he'd been buying gifts for dozens of women under the pretense of fan support. Nothing illegal about that, at least not yet. They suggested I move apartments just to be safe. I packed that same night. Claire helped me load everything into her car while I tried not to look at the empty doorway where the photos had been taped. It took weeks before I started sleeping again. I deleted every social account tied to that username, changed my phone number, and stopped using any platform that handled personal deliveries. Sometimes I'd get emails from old subscribers asking where I'd gone, and I'd feel a wave of nausea. I wanted to tell them the truth, but part of me knew it wouldn't change anything. Whoever he was, he'd already mapped out our lives, piece by piece, like we were part of some quiet collection he was building. Last month I got a call from Tessa. She'd moved too, and for a while everything had been quiet. Then, one evening, she came home to find a single white lily on her doorstep. No card this time, just the flower, left leaning against the door. She sounded calm when she told me, but I could hear it in her breathing. The same fear I'd lived with for months. I told her to call the police again, but we both knew how it would end. I still check my own door every night before bed, not because I expect to see another flower, but because I'm scared of the day I stop expecting it.